over on to Dan, the man, for the session on integrity. Here you go, bro.
Hey guys, thanks Prince for the intro. I didn't know that there was that story going around. Never even heard it.
At least you came back now.
Yeah, so we're gonna chat about integrity. So it's gonna be pretty casual. Um, so I think we'll have a little bit, if we have time, we'll kind of discuss a little bit towards the end as well. So integrity. So what is it, right? So what does the word mean? So according to Google, it's the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, or the state of being whole and undivided. So my goal for this, for the next few minutes, is to tell you why integrity matters and what we're called for, and what we can, like, some practical ways that, like, where we have choices every day, and how we can make better choices that will uphold our integrity. So um, I'd like to start off with this Bible verse. So this is in 2 Corinthians 5:20. And this comes in a section where it's called the ministry of reconciliation. So, like, us being the children of God, reconciling the people of the world to God. And it says, so we are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us. We speak for Christ when we plead, come back to God, right? So does anyone know what the role of an ambassador is, like in a country, like American ambassador to Ireland or Indian ambassador to Ireland? Like, what do they do? Any answers?
They represent the country and talk on behalf of their country.
Yeah. Angela saying go to events. Sure. So the ambassador is kind of the representative of that country, right? So if you think about, if any country has any trouble with any other country, the first thing that they usually do is, like, they summon the ambassador and be like, why is your country doing this, right? But also, we usually kind of hear about these ambassadors being summoned in a negative light, but also when they're in a country, that signifies a relationship between the other country that they're an ambassador of and the country that they're in, right? So it's like this mutual tie to say that we have interest in what's happening in your country. And the ambassadors also represent the values of the countries that they are part of. So it's almost like they're the person to go to if you want to know what they believe and what they value in their own country. So we are called to be Christ's ambassadors. We also represent a country or a kingdom, which is a heavenly kingdom. And what we do matters because we are representing what our country, our heavenly kingdom, those values, and what our leaders, who's the King of Kings, Jesus, has to say to the people, right? So Jesus uses this analogy as well. Like, Jesus says, you are the light of the world, you are the salt. So all of those kind of signify that we're kind of in a place where we are shedding light or making everything better uh, with who we are. So there's two reasons why I think integrity matters. One is that when people look at us, we actually represent something that is greater than us, which is us being the ambassadors of Christ. And the second is uh, we have a standard that Jesus has called us to, right? So what is that standard bar, right? In the Old Testament, you had to actually steal to, be committed of stealing. But in the New Testament, Jesus says, like, you just need to be jealous. Similarly, in the Old Testament, you kind of had to, like, actually commit adultery. But in the New Testament, you just have to lust. Or in the Old Testament, you have to actually murder. And then Jesus says, you hate someone in your heart, and it's almost like you murdered them, right? So Jesus really raised up the bar for what the standard is for us, right? So in that context, the bar is actually very high, but we always kind of think of things as, there's like these small things that we don't really pay attention to, and then there's like these big things, right? So for example, we always kind of like say, oh, you shouldn't like do something big, right? But then we might kind of use the same idea, but on a smaller scale, and we like let it slide. So for example, right? Um, so let's say that you are, think of you as a parent, right? Or maybe think of a time when you were the child and when your parents were telling you what to do. So maybe in your 8 years old, 10 years old, when you go to school, your parents always say, they don't tell you, oh, don't murder someone on the way, don't like steal a car. Like they're not the things that your parents are telling you, right? So I remember my parents telling me like, oh, don't take someone else's pencil. Listen to what your teacher says. Careful to like write down everything the teacher says and do your homework, right? Because to a child, you don't have to tell them about the big crimes because that's not normal. Like you don't usually commit those anyway, right? So as a parent, when you're looking at your child, you know how honest and with integrity a person is based on the little things you tell them to follow and not the big things, because the big things almost is like easy, right? Like none of us are going to be murderers, hopefully none of us are going to be stealing cars or doing any of those things. And like you don't even need Jesus to not do those things, because most people in the world don't do those things, right? But there are these little categories of like little small things, and you can even kind of say like really silly things that even like people might like laugh at us for, that we kind of usually just slide it under the rug and be like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's not a big deal, and for a lot of people it isn't a big deal. Like if you were to um say that, oh, I won't take a pencil for a pen from my workplace, that sounds really silly. And that sounds like someone will like look at you and be like, but it doesn't matter, you know um but a second part of this is also a thing of like, you are really who you are when you're on your own, right? So when people are there around you, there's always a little bit of pressure to act a certain way, to maybe follow certain rules. It's like, when there's a police in the road, you almost feel pressurized that you need to follow the speed limit. You would not try to break the speed limit when there's a police. But when there is no police or Garda, you are on your own. Like you can do what you want. But what you do on your own is a true character of who you are, rather than when you're with other people where your actions could be judged. So we're going to look at a little bit of a few examples, right? And these examples are all from my own life. And maybe after I've shared a little bit of my examples, maybe we can, have a discussion on some of the other examples that, we all kind of encounter on a daily basis, or, once in a while, like the common ones. So some of the common things in my life are things like car speeding. It's actually the first one that I had, right? It's easy to kind of go over the speed limit, especially when there's nobody looking. And when there's a road which literally has no cameras, there's nobody who's ever going to know who, like if you oversped a little bit. But there is someone else who knows, and that's God. And you know that you oversped, and you know that there's a law that tells you, this is how much you should go. But sometimes we kind of think of it as, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, like I know better, that like I can still be safe and still go a little bit over the speed limit. It should be fine. But one of the things with that is, like those rules are usually there, even though if we might feel it's unfair, unjust, we might think that, but they're always there to protect you as well as someone else. It's not just about someone else. Like even if the road is empty, it's the rules are still there to protect you, right? And there's like other rules like that you might think that are like really silly, like maybe something in your school, workplace, like maybe you're not allowed to go a certain place during a certain time, and it sounds really silly. And even in those silly ones, we are still called to abide by those silly rules. um, Now, there are obviously certain exceptions, but we will avoid some of those exceptions in where it's like moral issues, but we'll stay away from that for the moment, right? The usual other temptation is when we have done something that we should have, or we have not done something, Like for me, for example, sometimes it's like turning up late to some of my business calls, and there's always a temptation to say an excuse, and make it seem like I did something else. That is why I'm kind of late. But in fact, it could be I just overslept, right? So those little things, sometimes it's better to just say, look, I couldn't make it. You don't need to usually explain yourself, but trying to find a reasonable excuse to save yourself from embarrassment seems like a good thing to do, like you're projecting your best foot forward. But in reality, you're kind of just manipulating the truth a little bit to be like, yeah, I don't want to look silly here. I just want to, make sure that I have a reasonable excuse. Um, the other things that might happen odd times, it's like, the cashier at the till gives you extra change than you deserve, or maybe you forgot to, maybe the cashier forgot to bill something that you bought. So, in those situations where it's actually not your fault at all, like it is 100% the fault of the person who's charging you. But when you realize it, it's almost a matter of integrity to kind of say, okay, I didn't pay for this. I should have paid for it. Someone else made a mistake, but this isn't mine, right? And usually that either means going back and being like, hey, you forgot to do this, or you gave me extra change. Those could be the things. Or one of the things that I sometimes do is like sometimes you like walk out of the shop and like you're far off gone, and there's no way it makes sense to go back to give that money back or do something. A solution could be knowing that that money still isn't yours, and you can just like donate it to charity or give it to someone who's in need. The goal is that you didn't really do anything wrong. You're just kind of placed in a situation where you ended up having something that isn't yours. And the rightful thing to do possibly is give that away to someone who needs it, or if you can, go back to the shop and kind of give that. So this one, the next one I had is around um, online movies, pirated things. So I so during my teenage years, right? So during like say 12, 13, kind of that kind of thing, and that kind of age, uh, if you want, I would have been the guy who you would have come to if you wanted to know how to do those things, right? Like, how do I access like free movies and how do I get like free games, right? And my logic was, it's free. Like someone else has uploaded the video. They're the one who's doing the crime. I'm only consuming the content, right? Like, it's not like the police are going to come and arrest me because I actually didn't do anything. I didn't pirate those movies, right? It's not costing anything costing anyone anything. It's like a digital good, right? It's not like a product where someone has like spent time and money like manufacturing something and I've kind of like stolen something from the shop. It's just like digital stuff, right? um but so I used to be like big into like all this, like I used to have everything, like all the games and all of those things. But there was a time when I had my personal encounter with God during my teenage years. And one of the first things that God convicted me was this, right? And I felt so guilty. And it was almost like I actually stole those things. And the reality was, I actually did. It did actually cost someone to put that movie or a game together. It wasn't like it had no cost. It was something that I have deprived someone else from, which is my money. Like I should have normally gone to a shop, paid money, let the people who run the shop make money, the people who made the game make money and all of that. And I have stolen that from them while still benefiting the output of what they have given, right? So in a way, there's no way I could have get away from that of like, it wasn't stealing. It was stealing in every way. The only thing was it just looked a little different to me walking into a store and taking something and walking out. Um, so at that time, like when God really convicted me, I had to fix things. Like it wasn't like it didn't happen. Like it wasn't like, obviously I couldn't go to the movie directors and be like, hey, I stole this amount from you for the last couple of years. Here's your money. But I couldn't do that. But I had to fix something. And my solution was that, like I had stolen money, it wasn't mine. Now I had to give it away. So I donated a lot of the money that I should have paid for those things to people who needed it. And that was to charities and people who needed it. But as part of that, we also kind of have to think about like, what are we compromising when we're trying to take some of these small shortcuts, right? Because a movie to rent, digitally costs us like €2, €3, probably the price of a cup of coffee. Like those are the little things that we kind of like try to avoid. But what is the cost, right? Because the cost of that is like God looking at us and being like, is this a son or daughter who he can be proud of, who he can say to Satan, like Job, look at this son of mine, Job, in whom I find no fault. Like, is that someone that, God can present us to Satan and be like, what's wrong with him? And it's like these very little things that kind of adds up in some way to us achieving holiness and being what God has really called us to be. So these are my examples, right? So I'd love to hear some of your examples of situations and little things, maybe from your own experiences or things that you've heard. And maybe we can just talk about some of these issues, because I think even though as a concept, I don't think anybody would disagree that this is something that we should achieve. But I think there's a lot of practical things that sometimes we try to make excuses and be like, oh, that should be okay. So maybe we'll go through some examples. So anyone who wants to share your own examples or anything, feel free.
I got one. It was
Okay.
so Amazon. I ordered I ordered a tablet from Amazon, and it was quite pricey, and it never arrived. So I was waiting ages for it. It was like way past like the time it should have arrived. So they just sent me my money back, and I was like, all right, cool. So I ordered it again from another store, and it got sent to me and everything. But then the next day, the thing from Amazon also showed up. And I was so tempted to just take it. And the thing was, I was like fully going to be like, oh, it's fine. Like, it's not my fault that they, were late by a couple of weeks. It wasn't my fault that like they didn't have better management. So then I was like, gonna do it. And then I think kind of everyone in the house is that sort of consensus. And my mom like gets home and she's like, oh, you have to send that back. And I was like, yeah, obviously. I'm gonna send that back right now. So it was like it's like everyone kind of like jumped on that bandwagon until like the voice of reason showed up and was like, why do you want to keep that? And then I was like, oh yeah, why do I want to keep it? Yeah, this is just an example I thought of when you were talking about it.
Cool. That's a good one. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Go for it.
So oh my gosh, it's like confession. Imagine if I'm like watching a Disney movie, right? And it's not like Disney is not paying their employers. The people who made the movie are getting paid, graphics, whatever, costume, design, everyone is getting paid. So I'm not taking money out of their pockets. We know that Disney is making trillions, and we know that they're this multi-billion, trillion-dollar company. So it's not like I'm really taking anyone's bread away when I'm watching one Disney movie on 1, 2, 3 movies, So people could say that, or I am saying that. So what do I do then?
Well, I think a way to think about it is sometimes we kind of make these reasonable excuses that kind of get us into a slippery slope, right? So we will, like, for example, I think most of us would agree that if you stole €5 from a poor person, you should feel bad, right? But you steal €5 from a billionaire, you almost feel like, it's fine. But what you've stolen is the same. Like, it doesn't matter the difference of who that is to, but the magnitude of you stealing €5 is the same, right? And sometimes we kind of make those excuses like the one that Alvin shared as well, like Amazon, oh, they're making so much money, like, like I can take advantage of them. But if everybody thought that way, then the world would be a place of all thieves.
That makes sense.
I have a question, but it's also like an incident. Daniel knows about this already. So like, I subscribed to this website to like create like an online magazine thing, and I forgot to cancel it. Okay, and then it was like after a month, like right after the month, they sent me like they tried to take the money out of my account. So I like freaked out, and I was like, oh no, like I don't want to pay them. Obviously, it was like 100 and something euros. So I kept like dodging it, and then by the end, they sent me like an email being like, "Oh, this is like a court letter. You have to pay 200 euros and stuff." So I ended up like I had to pay it because I was super scared like that they would send someone after me. Um, but like free trials and things like that, is that wrong? That we kind of, because it feels like you're kind of taking advantage of like a company. So like it's kind of, well, not kind of similar to Evelyn's thing. But you're like watching something on free trial and then you just cancel it after. Like you're not gonna buy into the subscription. So would that be like morally wrong?
Not really. I mean, if someone is allowing you to do something, I think it's totally fine. Like imagine a ice cream shop could tell you that between 9 and 10, free ice cream. You wouldn't feel obliged to pay them for that free ice cream. They're telling you, come, there's free ice cream, right? But obviously, if you were to expect free ice cream after that time that they've said, you can't do that, right? So in a way, like a lot of these free trials, they want you to try it. It's like a free ice cream. So you can do whatever you want in that free trial, and it should be okay. And even if you don't ever plan to buy, like I'm pretty sure if someone gave you sample of food in like, I don't know, when you're going to Tesco or shopping, you wouldn't turn it down just because you don't think you will ever buy it. The whole point of the trial is that they can somehow convince you that you should buy it.
It's like I don't know if anyone's used that software called WinRAR, and it has a pop-up that goes, "Oh, you've used it for 30 days, you need to pay for it," but you can just close it and it doesn't do anything. It lets you use it forever. So I've just been using it indefinitely.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a little bit of a gray area in some of those things where they allow you to use it, like that software example. I think it's fine if you occasionally use it, right? But if you're an active user and like technically they could have completely locked it down, which they haven't done. So they have almost allowed you to preview it. It's like, if like a movie theater asked you, or like the ice cream shop, right? Let's stick with the ice cream shop. So if the ice cream shop said, every day you can get one ice cream for free, there's nothing really wrong with it, even though they say if this is your, yeah, well, there is a little bit of a gray area. Like if they say, oh, you need to pay if this is your third ice cream, then I suppose you kind of have to pay.
Maybe adding on top of Daniel though, in terms of regarding the free trial, free trials, absolutely agree with what Daniel's saying. They are there for OC companies to persuade you to use their products. But if you're intentionally creating separate accounts to use the free trial, then then you have to probably question your intention behind doing it probably. Like if you're creating like fake accounts just to use the free trial.
But
yeah.
Like,
I think
my question was like, like I have PowerPoint and stuff on my new laptop, and I'm not gonna pay for PowerPoint. I'm like Word. So I'm just using like I keep extending the red thing shows up like deactivated. I'm like install later, and I just keep installing. It's been like 3 months. But like, why would you pay for PowerPoint?
Yeah, I mean, if someone allows you to take, see, this is where it's a little bit of a gray area. So if someone allows you to take advantage of them, do you kind of take it as a permission to take advantage of them, or would we kind of be like, oh, okay, I should? But I think it's also a little bit, I say it's a gray area because let's say they give you 30-day trial, but you don't really need it at all. Like you're only maybe using it like once a year. Little bit of a gray area, I don't know, and they tell you to kind of, you can use it. But I think the right thing though, like absolute right thing is maybe going for something that is already free, or maybe using it on someone else's computer who has it. But I think it's a slippery slope, especially when it comes to digital content, right? Like I don't think this would have ever been a problem like 20 years ago when you had to buy CDs and when you had to like physically buy things. But you almost feel like this digital world is like you can like download, upload, and everything happens instantly. There isn't anything physically moving in the world. And we feel like, oh yeah, it's just fine, but it is a bit of a slippery slope. If you make certain things okay, then that logical consistency demands that in certain other things, when people are taking advantage of you for digital things, that should also be okay. Like imagine you were the ones who were like the software developer who's building it, and people are like, it doesn't cost Thomas anything.
Okay, separate and unrelated question. Does
Free regen.
PowerPoint have any free alternatives?
Yeah, there's slides.
Google Sheet.
Slides.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
Google Slides, Slido. There's a lot of alternatives to that. But yeah, that the other point to add to Thomas is that, if you feel like if you're only using a product every now and then, but you don't feel like you had to subscribe to just use a product that you're only using every now and then, there's definitely alternatives that are out there that obviously it may not be as good as the one that you're paying for it, but at least it'll get the job done to an extent to help you with it. But yeah, that's when we should be forced to look for alternatives than looking for loopholes instead. But
I think the easiest way I usually kind of do it is anything in the digital world. It's easier for us to understand when something is physical. Just imagine the same thing as a physical product, and then kind of try and play it through, because it kind of makes it easier. Because sometimes, like, none of us would walk into a store and take a CD and walk out without paying. But we somehow, the same logic, we kind of make exceptions in the digital world. So in the digital world, just convert that into a real world situation and see how you would react. And that usually is the right way we should react.
Yeah, so I have one story on Amazon as well. So basically, they send me. There's a company on Amazon. They send me a load of random sports equipment, and they actually put money into my account to buy these stuff, and sometimes they overpay me. Is that like, do I have to pay them back actually? Because their intention is just for me to buy that one product, or like for free, but they gave me extra money. Should I keep it or give it back?
I don't know, man. Like, I think a lot of these things, I don't think.
You're like getting Daniel to make a decision.
Exactly. Like, it's not like I'm like the end person for what you should do and what you shouldn't do. But I think how you got to think of it is, like, as cliche as it sounds, what would Jesus do? And maybe also try and translate it into like a real world thing. And like, okay, what would like that credit seems like it's not real. But imagine the credit is someone like a person. Amazon is a person who actually physically gave you money, right? And just play that out in your scenario and see how you would react if everything was physical.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna get a lot of messages now, Daniel, just being like, "Hey, Dan, am I allowed to do this?"
You know what this reminds me of in Exodus, when only Moses knows about the law and like everyone keeps going to him. So like all these thousands of Israelites, and he's up there every single day solving all their problems. And imagine all their problems. Like maybe kids would go up to him, be like, "She stole my doll." And Moses would be like, "No, it said number 5 or whatever number it is. Do not steal." It's not number 5. Is it? Someone correct me. It's our doll. Yes, communism.
So we went through a good couple of examples and stories. So I think we'll kind of start to wrap it up a little bit. So by no means I shouldn't be the person, or I don't think anybody else should be like looking at other people to say, oh, this is something that you shouldn't have done. I think a call to action here is that my goal was that you would just try and see things from a different perspective, because usually when it comes to integrity, we think from a perspective that makes it okay. But if you were to think of that same situation from a different perspective, you might yourself reason it to be differently, and the right action might be different to how you see or how you were seeing it originally, right? So like there are people who can go to the extremes of it, and which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Like I knew this auntie from church, like she wouldn't even take a pen from, like, she was a nurse, so she wouldn't even take a pen from workplace. Like, apparently they have a lot of pens lying around to fill in your, the handoff thing. And she was like, that's not my pen. I didn't pay for it. Sure, it technically costs the hospital probably like 2 or 5 cents per pen. But she was like, yeah, but still it's not mine, and usually it's to the extent that God has convicted you for, and it shouldn't be a system of the things to do and the things not to do, because the whole point of like God working in all of this is that he's the one convicting you of what you should do and what you shouldn't do. It's not a list of it's not a list of rules, because if you had a list of rules, like that's what the Old Testament people had, and the list of rules is never going to be adequate for the perfection that God wants us to reach. And that's why we kind of need the Holy Spirit to guide us in all of these things as well. And sometimes, I think it's also worth mentioning that if someone else is doing something that you feel is wrong, you should of course call them to a higher standard, but in no means does it call for us to condemn someone and be like, oh, you did wrong, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to get each other to heaven, and we don't get there by throwing stones at each other. Like, we're all called to pull up everybody, to bring them up, and like, there was a time in that personal testimony that I shared, like at that moment when God convicted me, that was very important for me, that I had to give that money away and everything. But if anybody reasoned with me and said it was wrong, I don't know how much I would have listened. And there is a part of God's hand in this as well, that God is the one who is changing everyone's heart and calling us to a higher level. So I'd like to finish with this, right? So there's a nice passage in the Bible, in John 1:47. This is where Jesus meets Nathaniel, one of his disciples, for the first time. And most of the translations translated as, when Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." But I really like the way that New Living Translation translates it. And New Living Translation translated as they approached, Jesus said, "Now here is a genuine son of Israel, a man of complete integrity," right? So imagine, could Jesus say that about ourselves? Like, if Jesus met us, could he say, this is a man or a woman of complete integrity? And I'll be the first one to put up my hand and say, like, I don't think Jesus can say that about me. And I definitely have a lot of things that from where I need to get to, there's loads of things that I need to work on. And similarly, we're all in different stages. Maybe I don't break the speed limit, but maybe I might be doing something else that none of you guys would ever do, but also, I just want to end in a point of like, just reflection, like maybe just think about other aspects of your life where you've never thought it ever mattered, that if what you do there matters, right? And if the God is convicting you of anything there, like, go to confession, like, go and seek God to also show you more things, and ask God for forgiveness. And this is a journey. By no means are you defined by what you have done. It's about what you're going to do, and God wants us to achieve what he has called us for. So with that, I'd like to hand over back to Prince.